Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Top of the Town podcast. If you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we're now on the road to 500 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. If you love sports content, sports talk, anything from sports betting to updated rankings every week, it's all right here on the Top of the Town podcast. And here today, we have Why Not Wednesday, where I answer any questions you guys have for me right here on the podcast. If you want your questions answered here every week, make sure to hit @TalkOfTheTown_pod on Instagram, TikTok, or I'll even right here in the YouTube comments if you like, and you'll get your questions answered here every week. And getting into the first question here, Vikings fan here, I watched JJ McCarthy and just really am not seeing it. But the real question is, what do we do with McCarthy after this season? Who do we get, or do we try to run it back? I could eliminate one of those right off the bat, and that's running it back with JJ McCarthy. There is a 0% chance that happens next year for the Minnesota Vikings. I always say one of the best abilities, just for anything, whether or not you're working in a cubicle or you're in the NFL or in the MLB, is just being availability. And JJ McCarthy on top of his play is never available. Hell, now even this week coming up against the Packers a few days ago, he on the flight home, apparently he was experiencing concussion-like symptoms. Now apparently Max Brosmer is in line to start this week. I forget who they go against this weekend, but he's in line to start, which is now, I don't even know how many games JJ McCarthy's now missed this year. He missed a majority of the season with a high ankle sprain. And last year, obviously, he missed the entire season with an ACL injury. So he's just not available either. And on top of that, when he does play, he gets worse every single week he plays. So I just think the Vikings are in some deep water with JJ McCarthy. It's not looking good. And like I mentioned, with Brosmer this week, the funny thing is he doesn't really have to perform well to really take McCarthy's job. Now, I don't think he's going to. Again, I think they're going to ride this McCarthy thing out the rest of the season or whenever he decides to come back to play again. He had the world's longest ankle sprain earlier this season. He was just out forever. Carson Wentz was getting beat to death, and yet he just still was not coming back. So clearly he's in no rush to really come back on the field regardless. I think he knows his time in Minnesota is kind of run out as well. So we'll see how long this concussion lasts, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or they shut him down, whatever they decide to do. I don't think they're going to bench him. Again, you invested a really high round pick in this guy, and I think they're going to plan on shipping him off. So if he can show some sort of something at the end of the season, whether or not they do plan on shipping him off, or do we ride it out, which I just do not think is going to happen. I think they will ship him off before they do that, but try to get some sort of value back for him. And you're not obviously going to get, the 10th overall pick or whatever they spent on him, but you're going to get some sort of value back, hopefully. But, Brosmer this week, again, McCarthy tossed for, I think, 89 yards against the Packers on Sunday. If he just gets a 100-yard game with no touchdowns and no picks, realistically, he should be able to put McCarthy on the bench and play the rest of the season. Unless he goes out there and throws for 4 touchdowns and 350 yards or something like that. I don't think there's any chance he's going to be able to start. Again, as I mentioned, they want to see if they can get some value back for McCarthy or see what they got. But, the Minnesota Vikings as an organization, historically, they're actually pretty good. Now, they don't have, the Super Bowl trophies or anything like that to show for it. I think they've been to 4 and have lost all 4, but they've been to multiple NFC championships, especially as of recently. They went to one not that long ago against the Eagles back in, I think, 2016 or something like that. I guess that's about 8, 9, 10 years ago or so since they've been to one. But still, they've had some good years in between. Last year, they were 14-3. They were 60 minutes away from having the number 1 seed. They made the NFC championship with Favre back in 2009 or something like that against New Orleans. And they ended up throwing that interception that set up New Orleans to win the game, of course. But, they have historically, they're a pretty good franchise. So I do trust them in terms of making the move to move off. This just isn't going to work. If you think that the organization and Kevin O'Connell can look these players and hell, even the fan base in the eyes and be like, we're rolling this back another year. If he can look Justin Jefferson in the eyes in his prime and be like, we're going to roll back with McCarthy again, he's going to request a trade, and I think the fan base is literally going to riot. It's not going to happen. So, and I know you're not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just saying in general that there's just no way that they're going to do that. I do trust them to make the right move, and seeing that his play, he gets worse every week. He's just not efficient, bad turnovers, and he's not available. As I said, if he was available, if he was playing at all, could show some sort of, hey, you know what? At least I'm healthy and I'm just available to play. That would be some sort of upside. There is zero upside with JJ McCarthy. I try to think of one. There's nothing. Maybe the only thing is, well, he was talented enough to go with the 10th overall pick, but even so, we look at him in college. The thing was, and it's starting to come to light now, that he was a handoff merchant in college, and I'm not holding that against him. I mean, I guess I kind of am a little bit, but in terms of his draft stock, like, you look at him, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, it was defense and running the ball and not forcing JJ McCarthy to throw the football. I mean, no, I guess you could say, yeah, he was a national champion, but Stetson Bennett was a national champion. Look at all these guys that are in it. Tua was a national championship. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Tua, it's not necessarily saying that his career hasn't worked. He was a passing yards leader, and I do think Tua has had a pretty decent career so far. He's actually, before all the concussions and everything, he's actually been pretty good. So, I mean, even still, I don't even think McCarthy, especially to this point, doesn't even scratch the surface to being as good as Tua has been throughout his career. Any season he's had, even this season, Tua, who is having probably the worst season of his career, looks way better than McCarthy does. I think the Vikings would get him in a heartbeat, even with Tua's contract. Well, I guess if you could take away Tua's contract, they'd do so. But still, just going player for player, avoiding the contract situation and everything, they'd take almost any other quarterback in the league. Because I think I said this on Monday, that McCarthy is not only the worst starting quarterback in the NFL, but he would be one of the worst backups in the NFL. We had a couple backups play on Sunday. Rudolph, Jacoby Brissett, like, hell, Mac Jones has come and stepped in this year, has stepped in at points this year. And those guys look way better. Mason Rudolph looks just miles better than JJ McCarthy has with a worse offense. So I think, I don't know. It's just, there's no way they run this operation back with JJ McCarthy next year. Now, in terms of what they can do or who they can get, I think they're limited. I don't think there's any chance they go to draft a QB. The thing is with Darnold last year, too, I actually meant to mention this, that it was insane now looking back that they moved off of Sam Darnold. Like, they should have kept him. And speaking of drafting a quarterback, that's why I'm mentioning this right now, is like, you could have only hoped JJ McCarthy could have turned out to be half as good as Sam Darnold was this year. And he just hasn't even been he's just not even on the same stratosphere as Sam Darnold is. So Sam Darnold wanted to stay in Minnesota, apparently, but they wanted to stick on with McCarthy. I think Minnesota did offer Darnold a contract, but Seattle came with a little more. But you look his deal compared to Tua's and Kyler's and Trevor Lawrence, it's ridiculous how much better he's playing than those guys. I think he's making like $100 million less than them. It's pretty wild, but I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback. I don't think they're quite in the market for that. They're kind of in a win now mode. They seen that they're legitimately only a QB away from contending. So, I think they're going to roll out and go and maybe try to make a trade for Kyler, sign Mac Jones, which is what I could see them doing. I think they're going to kind of take the Sam Darnold route they had last year. Like, there's a market for Mac Jones, and I think he signed for like 2 years with the 49ers, but they trade a third-round pick to get him. I mean, I think they're going to be desperate to get a quarterback that can show any sort of signs of life in that organization. Mind you, McCarthy with sprained ankle was out, would seem like forever. Any sort of little injury, wrist, or anything he gets, he just sits out forever. Mac Jones, look, while I am a Patriots fan, and Mac Jones drove me crazy in New England, and it's not necessarily all his fault. Belichick hired Patricia, and I could just go on forever about it. Really kind of derailed Mac Jones' career, especially in New England. But, about a month or so ago, when they went against the Rams for the first time, and he was out there playing with his knee was just beat to hell, his leg was. He was clearly out there playing in some serious pain. They showed he almost ate like a whole thing of bananas out there trying to avoid getting cramps. I mean, he was doing everything he could to stay out there on the field. They ended up winning the game with a bunch of backups, especially at receiver. They ended up signing like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Minnesota would kill to have a quarterback like that. Every time McCarthy gets a little bit of a sting in his pinky, he's sitting on the bench and can't play for 2 weeks. So yeah, I think Mac Jones, maybe Kyler, they're going to try to get someone else to fill in that role. I don't think they're going to draft one. I think they're out of the market of drafting a QB as of this moment going into the next year. What is the most overrated franchise within the last 10 years, would you say? Me personally, I'd say the Buffalo Bills, as they get praised every year and are the top of Super Bowl odds every year as well. I'd say in Buffalo, I guess you could throw them in there. If you wanted to say in terms of getting to the Super Bowl or having any real big success, you could throw Buffalo in that mix. I'd say if you're throwing Buffalo, you have to throw Baltimore in as well, maybe even Dallas. You could throw in a bunch of teams, but one team I would throw in for being, or a team I'd say is the most overrated for being consistent but not doing anything and they get a lot of praise, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. In terms of the last 10 years or so, they haven't really had a gap year of being bad. I guess they had that Roethlisberger injury like pre-2020 where he tore his shoulder apart and was out for the year. But even still, they finished 500 or just above 500 or something like that. So they consistently finish over 500. I mean, Mike Tomlin's never had a season under that ever. So they have success. They finish around the same every year. They haven't won a playoff game in almost 10 years. And at least with Baltimore and Buffalo and Dallas, and hell, you could throw in some other teams in there as well. They've won a playoff game or so. I mean, they go in, whether or not they get bounced out in the first round every now and then or whatever. They've seen an AFC or an NFC champion. Well, Dallas hasn't seen an NFC championship, but they've won a playoff game here and there. Pittsburgh just hasn't even won a playoff game, but they consistently get there. So, to me, look, they're a good franchise over the last 10 years or so, but in terms of being overrated, I'd say I'd throw Pittsburgh in there and being number one for me. They haven't really done anything since they had the Killer Bees. Back in 2020, they were 11-0, and then they finished like 1-4, I think. They got just blasted by Cleveland in the wild card round by Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. So that was pretty embarrassing. And with Pickett and everything, I mean, I do give them credit because the players they've had with like Kenny Pickett and stuff, they do still manage to even, kind of squeak in the playoffs or manage to, again, finish over 500, which is just pretty unreal. Tomlin deserves a lot of credit for that. But in terms of success, they just do not have much. I think they're kind of in the worst spot you could be in, is like they don't draft high enough. Or they don't draft high enough to get, a really high caliber quarterback they could build on for the future. And their signings have been very questionable. Their trades, the DK Metcalf trade, look at JSN and not JSN, George Pickens, a guy they traded away who is better than Metcalf in almost every statistical category and is not on a major contract and is a lot younger than Metcalf is. Like Metcalf is going on his second or I think his third contract. So again, that's just the trade there is just not really it's pretty inexcusable, to be honest with you. Again, Metcalf isn't bad by any stretch, but you look at the season Pickens is having next to CeeDee Lamb, and I think Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure, enjoys having DK Metcalf, but I think he'd love to have Pickens just a little more, and this guy you drafted as well. So I put Pittsburgh in terms of their questionable moves. Just their, they do finish over 500 and they've gotten to the playoffs, but it feels like every season is the exact same with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'd have to throw them in there, and just no playoff wins over like almost 10 years. That's my number one there. Commanders fan here. I was thinking the other day, should we trade Jayden Daniels? We could get at least 2 to 3, maybe even 4 first-round picks back and really build up a young core of guys and get another QB and not turn Jayden into RG3. I think that's pretty insane if the Commanders were to trade Jayden Daniels. Now, I know you're not saying that they are, but I know it's kind of a hypothetical, or it is a hypothetical. It kind of reminds me of the Luka Doncic trade with the Dallas Mavericks for last year. Him getting traded to the Lakers. And now I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but I do think there was an inside job behind that Luka trade again. Luka gets traded to the biggest market in the NBA with the LA Lakers when the viewership was plummeting every single game, every week. They was just really down in the dumps for the NBA. And also Luka gets traded to the Lakers, and the Mavericks end up making the play-in. They were just a few minutes shy of making the playoffs. They had like a 0.8% chance to get Cooper Flag. They end up getting him. Yeah, to me, that's not a coincidence. And the NBA is a really shady history as it is, especially with draft picks. Cough, Patrick Ewing to the Knicks is one of them I could name. But anyway, like that's kind of like if Devin Booker, besides that, like back when they made the finals back in 21, if the next year the Suns traded Booker to the Lakers the next year in the middle of the season. So to me, that was just weird. It's really off. Like Jayden Daniels, if he were to get traded, like you've seen what that did to the Mavericks and Nico Harrison, who's now out of a job, and just the catastrophe that's caused. Like the Mavericks suck this year. And I just, it's crazy. Again, that's a whole nother topic for another day. But that would be kind of remind me a lot of that. That could just turn out to be really ugly. And that's the thing is like, Sauce Gardner a month ago went for 2 first-round picks. Jayden Daniels would go for probably 4, maybe even 5. You're telling me, I was just talking about Minnesota a couple of minutes ago about how you're telling me they would trade 5 first-round picks to get Jayden Daniels? I'm sure as hell they would. They are desperate. There's teams desperate for a QB. And you look at Washington's draft history in general. They don't have a very good track record in terms of their draft. Like, they've waited a long time to maybe get the best quarterback in their franchise history, but Jayden Daniels has the potential to do so. Took him to the NFC Championship last year with a team that honestly was okay, but NFC Championship, I mean, you stun the Lions, the number 1 seeded Lions, take them out in their home stadium, and you're 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl. That's pretty crazy, especially in his rookie year. So I get it. But also, as I mentioned with McCarthy and the Vikings, like, okay, if you were to trade him, you would have to hope, like, the quarterback, if they were to draft Ty Simpson or Dante Moore, or how they took a chance on Lenora Sellers or Fernando Mendoza, if they were to take a chance on those guys, like, you'd have to hope they turn out to be half as good as Jayden Daniels has been throughout his career so far. I know he's dealing with injuries this year, but hell, so is the entire team and really the entirety of the NFL. I just even hope whoever you draft, let's say you drafted Mendoza or something, or Dante Moore, like, that they'll turn out to be half as good as Jayden Daniels has been so far. You have to pray for them to do so, because a majority of first-round picks are busts. They just are. I mean, now look at Cleveland Farrell. I mean, a guy who was drafted top 10 and he's had a long, sustained career is widely regarded as a bust. Like, he just is, but he's had a long career. I mean, I know that's just kind of out of the blue mentioning him, but those are guys, like, you wouldn't necessarily think that are that good, but even still have long careers. Like Mendoza and guys, they don't necessarily have to be as good to have a long career if they want to have a long career in the NFL, but Jayden Daniels has like Hall of Fame potential. That, to me, even hope you could hit on 2 of your 5 first-round picks, 3, let's say 3 out of 5. Let's give them a little over half. If they were to get 4 or 5 first-round picks, you'd have to get pretty lucky to do so. And look, hypothetically, if they were to trade him and you were to hit on 4 of the 5 and you were to hit on a quarterback and Mendoza looked like he'd be really good in the future of the league, then I'd say go for it. But the chances of that happening are just so low. And you put your franchise in serious jeopardy doing that. Look at the Mavericks again. I mentioned now, even with Cooper Flag, they want to send off AD. They're like 5-13. They're terrible. And Cooper Flag is seen as like a generational prospect, but still, they even hope he turns out. Look, Luka's averaging 35 a game on LA right now. They even hope Cooper Flag can average 30 a game and lead their team to the finals. It's just, you'd even hope he can do that in the first place. Luka's done that already. I just, that trade would be very reminiscent. They even hope, again, your track record with QBs and drafting in general isn't great as it is anyway. And you get a guy who you just have to hope you can keep healthy and do right beside him. It's just, I'd rather take the chance on doing that than trading him away. There are some serious precautions, especially or putting your franchise in jeopardy, especially when you're building a new stadium. You need to sell out your seats. You know, do you have a guy who can do that? And it's not worth the risk. It's a high risk for a very low chance at even getting half the reward there. So I wouldn't do it personally. How do you feel about teams like Baltimore and Buffalo that just feel like they're always on the cusp of a Super Bowl, but never go all in? Do you think they should ship all of their picks off like the Rams did a few years ago? Or excuse me, sorry, I read that wrong. Picks off like the Rams did a few years ago for proven talent, or still try to build? Look, I'm always kind of on the cusp with this as well. But I've seen the Rams, and they got their 1 year of success, and people said, oh, their future is in serious jeopardy. They have no first-round draft picks. Look how fast they turned it around. The next year after they won the Super Bowl, Stafford was down. They looked terrible. It was looking like they were going to go in 5 years of just utter trash. Like they were going to be really bad for the next 5 years or so. And McVay was talking about retiring. You were talking about a Stafford potential retirement, Aaron Donald retire. Like it was not good there in Los Angeles. Look how fast they turned it around. And they went all in. And I said if Baltimore would just go all in and trade their first round pick and get a guy that is just proven and say, screw it, we're just going for it. We have Lamar in his prime. Lamar also, too, is like, you see he's dealing with injuries. This year, he kind of looks like a shell of himself because he's dealing with injuries. Like, you look at him now, he was drafted almost 10 years ago. You could say he's kind of entering kind of the twilight years of his prime. Like, maybe his 2 or 3 years of his prime left. Like, what are you going to waste it for? I say go all in. Buffalo the same. Like, just, you know what, now, no one's going to blame you for trading 1 or 2 first-round picks to get, if they were to get Myles Garrett, and I don't know if the Cleveland would have traded him within the division, but if Buffalo were to do so and trade 2 or 3 first-round picks to get Myles Garrett, who would blame them for doing that while they had Josh Allen in their prime? Because those 2 or 3 first-round picks you would have drafted, especially when you're drafting in the low 20s, 30, 29, 28, you're going to draft Myles Garrett or someone like that. It's rare. TJ Watt at the end of the first round years ago, it happens. Like there's multiple examples, but it's not often. And you look at guys like the Ravens have drafted with those picks like Odafe Owe and Rashad Bateman, it's turned out to be okay. But if you're going to trade in those 2 first round picks and add another one in there to trade for, hell, I can't necessarily think of a name, but so let's just stick with the Myles Garrett thing right now. Or let's say they could have used that to trade for Deebo Samuel or something when he was in his prime back in 2020 or something like that. A real guy they could have that would have taken Baltimore over the edge when they really needed a receiver. They had everything but a receiver. If you could have gotten him or something like that, it would have been pretty nuts. So I just think, honestly, I don't blame teams. I don't think anyone, including the fan base, would blame teams for going all in. I think teams like that should, because they try to stick with their draft picks. But when you have a generational guy like a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, I just feel like those are like once in a lifetime kind of players. Like you look at the whole history of the Ravens franchise, which is short, but I mean over 20 plus years or so, 25 plus years, in the Bills franchise, they've never had a guy like Josh Allen in their franchise in terms of playing the quarterback position ever. Both of them have never had it. So I should go all in and just go for it, because what's the chances you get a guy like that within the next 10, 15, 20 years or so? Slim to none. So you just might as well go for it. I believe they should pull the Rams there and do it. What is one name you look out for in this year's head coaching cycle? That could be a name that isn't talked about enough. I know Lane Kiffin was in the cycle, but it's looking like he's staying in college football. And I know you guys have guys like Minter and Mike McCarthy potentially coming back and stuff like that. You have a lot of big names. But I think one guy, I'm going to say a guy that is kind of an underrated hiring that I'd look out for is Robert Saleh getting another chance as a head coach. Look, no head coach stands a chance in terms of being a head coach for the Jets. They just don't. That's a place where careers, quarterbacks, receivers, defensive, wherever you play at, coach, whatever, your career goes to die at. And I think Robert Saleh, what he's doing with that defense, what I witnessed against Carolina the other day, which I don't think Carolina's great anyway, but regardless of all the injuries they have, you're missing Bosa and Fred Warner. What he's doing with that defense as it is, and kind of just a big personality, and I think can build a culture somewhere that's just not the New York Jets because no one can do so, apparently. We see that with Aaron Glenn and just anyone else throughout the last 50 years or so, besides maybe Rex Ryan. Um, I think he deserves another shot. Now, I think he might stick with the 49ers another year or two and just kind of, lay low maybe. But hell, let's say a team that, maybe Tennessee, they have a young quarterback. And I know their franchise has kind of been in shambles the last couple of years, but they've had periods of success, unlike the New York Jets. Um, teams maybe like Cincinnati, like you have Joe Burrow, like maybe Robert Saleh and Zach Taylor ends up getting fired. Do they or the New York Giants? A lot of young, serious talent there. You're telling me Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, like Brian Burns. You're telling me he would love to coach that defense and be the head coach of that team. You have some big personalities on offense with Malik Neighbors, Dart, Scatterbill. Like I think that's a pretty underrated spot for him to go. And I think if he were to get a shot at coaching that job, I think he would take it in a heartbeat. Again, there's only 32 of those jobs, and you figure, hell, I coach the Jets. I'll just go coach the Giants, a team with a lot more talent. And, they haven't been good in a while, but for once, they have some sort of a bright future with that in the last, 10 years, 15 years or so since Eli Manning. Yeah, I'd say Robert Saleh is a guy I throw in there that is a pretty underrated hiring and a guy that I think could really turn some around. That's a guy I'd keep an eye out for. That's not necessarily being talked about, but I think a guy you should consider giving another chance as head coach. That's someone I'd put out there. But I haven't really kept an eye too much on the head coaching cycle. I've been focused on a lot of other things. When that time comes in the offseason, I'm definitely going to talk a lot more about it. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about that there. I'd give Robert Saleh a big time chance there. But that is it for today's video, y'all. Hope you all enjoyed it. Again, if you want your questions answered here on Wide Out Wednesday, I do this every week. Make sure to hit at @TalkTheTown_pod on Instagram, TikTok, or even again here in the YouTube comments if you'd like. But that's it for today, y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow on Thanksgiving. I have an upload ready for that. And yeah, take it easy, everybody.